For the majority of your life, when you looked up into the sky, there was the comforting glow of the moon shining upon you. A familiar orb floating in the cosmos, an object that all of humanity accepts the unparalleled beauty of. However, this idea of a floating object in the sky is only half true. That object isn't a planet. It is an alien spacecraft, watching silently from above since the dawn of humanity. We are here to expose the truth. The government doesn't want you to know. NASA doesn't want you to know. Russia doesn't want you to know. Have you ever wondered why the highest tension war ever, the Cold War, essentially ended by a space shuttle going to the moon? It's because the governments of the world had to create a pretense to motivate a huge portion of their population to go into space. Have you ever wondered why the Challenger spacecraft blew up? Or why the moon landing conspiracies are some of the most popular in the world? These things can all be explained by one simple fact: the moon is fake. However, we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take it back to the beginning, when the moon was being first observed closely. Today, we are consulting the experts. First, we have Deborah DeLong, who has devoted her entire life to exposing the truth.
Hello, we're here with Deborah DeLong. She's going to give us some background on the entire conspiracy around the moon being entirely fake.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that warm introduction. Please allow me to impart on all of you some knowledge. You see, in the beginning of mankind, people knew that there was the moon, the sun, and the stars. Everybody marveled at their existence, and men even worshipped them. Much time passed without these views changing. That is, until humans started becoming smart. Starting in the 1600s, humans began making telescopes. These telescopes allowed them to look into the sky and study the moon. By the time the 1900s came along, important people realized that it wasn't a barren wasteland. The governments of the world used their secret technologies and learned that it was in fact an alien spaceship. Aliens had been watching us since the beginning. So what did they do about it? They tried their best to get into space to talk to them. Look at World War II. What the world was real fighting for were the German scientists who knew how to build rockets. Look at the Cold War. America and Russia both wanted to get to the aliens first, motivating their populations with the space race. The average person cannot see the space station anymore either. The US government launched a satellite that projects a hologram over the surface of the alien spaceship, so that no bot would ever have concrete proof. And that brings us to today. There are aliens. They are real. The people need to know.
Thank you, Ms. DeLong. This leads us into one of the most notorious conspiracies of all time, the fake moon landings. Obviously, since the moon is a spaceship, nobody landed there. The astronauts were really sent into space to orbit the alien moon and possibly make contact with them. Whether they were successful or not, only the government can know. What we can prove, however, is that the film of the moon landing is completely fake. We have today an expert in the field, Mrs. Lisa Moore, to help explain it to us.
Hello, we're here today with a very special Lisa Moore, who has generously agreed to discuss the first fake moon landing with us today. So Lisa, what makes you believe the moon landing is fake?
Well, not only is it fake, it's not real. Here's the thing. People who believe that the moon exists think they have proof because those people were up there doing that fancy experiment where they dropped the hammer and the falcon feather. If you were to drop a hammer and a falcon feather here on Earth, which is going to hit the ground first, John?
The hammer.
That's right. Why?
Because of...
The feather's gonna float, John. The feather's gonna float because there's air. And see, when they were faking the moon landing, they dropped the feather and the hammer and they hit at the same time, quote unquote, proving they were on the moon because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere which would affect the feather. But here's the thing. Did you see those guys walking around there? They had those things on their head and they could have easily been in a Hollywood chamber where they didn't need to breathe the lack of oxygen. They could have been in that vacuum chamber and done that same experiment. And I swear, that background, that backdrop that they used, I saw it in the Planet of the Apes. I know I did. I think it's fake.
How dare they? There you have it, folks. Lisa Moore.
So what happened afterwards? Humans simply continued trying to build ways to continue meeting with the aliens. More spacecraft were sent into orbit. As Deborah DeLong said earlier, a satellite was sent to project a hologram on the space station so that nobody could tell from Earth. Over the course of the next few decades, humans got quite good at rocket building. So good, in fact, they were willing to send a teacher to speak with the aliens. This was on the famous Challenger. The teacher was actually a world-class expert on linguistics and was sent to try and bridge the communication gap with the aliens. Miss Meredith Adelman remembers the circumstances quite well, and she's here today to enlighten us.
And we're here with Meredith Adelman. Talk about her thoughts on the Challenger being exploded.
Huh?
What are your thoughts on the Challenger?
Oh, I remember Challenger. I'm old. I was in 4th hour geometry class, sophomore year. We were all so excited. It was such a great event to know the teacher was going up there and it was a real person and that we were going to be able to like conquer all this and go out into space. And then the aide came into class and he said, "The Challenger blew up." And we thought he was joking because he was kind of a jokester. That's what happens. We thought he was joking around. And he wasn't. But you know, he was kind of a weird kid. Kind of think maybe he was part of the alien plot and he knew about it ahead of time, because I'm not so sure that when I had 4th hour that's when the Challenger was actually going up. And then there were like people, because those AV kids back in the day, they were kind of weird. They're like the really nerdy Bill Gatesies, only even nerdier. And they all seemed to know exactly when it was going to happen because they kept making fun of it and they go, when they were replaying it on TV, and they seemed to know. I think they were all just aliens and they knew what was going to happen, and they knew they were going to be able to conquer the world someday. And look at that Bill Gates. He has conquered the world, I'm telling you. It's all part of the great scheme of things. You're
And that brings us all the way to nearly the present time. Current space explorations are limited. We haven't sent a man to the moon in decades. Perhaps the government is afraid. Perhaps they have nothing to say. Who can really know? The current space project is the famous International Space Station. How convenient. When you think about it, it's pretty much literally a floating meeting room. The astronauts are highly trained and could perhaps even serve as a face-to-face with the aliens. And finally, there is the reboot of NASA's space exploration. We plan to go to Mars in the next 15 years. Who knows? If the aliens have been observing us for millennia, they surely must have explored Mars too. What we do know is this: the people can handle the truth. Demand it from your leaders. The fate of humanity should not be decided by men in suits who, for all we know, could be making deals with aliens as we speak. Thank you, and God help us.